Okay. Feeling your lower back when you're doing these hip glute dominance type patterns, hip lifts, RDLs, single RDLs, maybe even getting into like that big like step up, kind of forward lean. One, the lower back, the core, has to support the body in those positions. So you're never really going to get to like a point where no matter what, you're never going to feel your lower back and only feel whatever said muscle, right? Because it has to come along for the ride. But we definitely never really want, if we're trying to like focus on that hinge pattern in the glutes, where we're like, well, we feel the lower back more than the glutes, right? Or if the soreness lasts even longer in the lower back, could be a couple things. One could be we're new to exercise. Two could be what we're doing outside of the gym is contributing to that. But let's talk about the pattern specifically and generally what happens and why we get into this lower back tension, this lower back fatigue while we're inside of that. Is if you think about the two pieces, these two planes, I have my hip plane and my rib plane, right? Now this is a neutral, right? We all live in a kind of slight anterior tilt, and that's normal athletic. We're in like a big hollow crunch, we're in this like posterior. When we're doing our patterns and our hinges, we're trying to stay as much neutral as possible without moving in and out of this hip to rib plane, right? And what happens is we tend to get to a point where we get really focused on externally what's going on, and we lose that concentration of holding this neutral position. So that if I'm deadlifting, and imagine, I'm deadlifting, boom, 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 I'm getting fatigued, I'm losing my mental focus, my mental skill of focus, or I'm losing the inability to have the control through muscular fatigue, and I start to lift, and when I'm getting so focused on what's happening externally with the implement, I start to open. See how I'm getting compressive back here, and then I get to like closing, right? Or I get to closing, right? Really what happens is I start manipulating where is the implement going, right? And in order to do that, I lose my core control. And when I lose my core control, I start letting my lower back do more of the work than the glute muscles are intended to do the work. Okay, so if I think of an RDL, and I think a super high hip, right, big stretch against those glutes, and I'm going and I'm going, and I'm moving my hip first, and I think, oh yeah, I'm really getting fatigued. Just move this thing through space, and I lift and I compress down. Now this can happen at 1 rep, at 1 through 20. It can happen only on the 20th one. But if I take that and I finish every set with this compression, where every time I get back here, I'm losing it and I'm opening. In order to stand, I have to get back to neutral. This part of my lower back is doing more of the lifting of the weight than the actual glutes of the weight, of the lift, okay? I'd almost think about like, man, my abs should be as tired as my glutes are inside those big patterns so that I'm forcing this neutral position as much as possible. Or when you take something like a really good hip lift off of a bench, and I can almost think I should over-focus on the crunch position so that my neutral becomes crunched, right? And then I just stay in that crunch no matter what. So I never allow myself to break open when I'm hip lifting. See how I'm breaking open in those pieces? That neutral position. Sometimes it's hard to think what is neutral the entire time. And I'll think, fuck it, I'll just do crunch and stay. So no matter what, my glutes are pushing my body up through space. And that's what we want to think about. When you get into step-ups, it's the same thing. I get to this position, right? And I go to step up. If I don't have the mobility here, and I'm leaning forward, I'm rounding, right? Or as I go to step up, I compress to get myself tall. And now I'm using my lower back. Instead of being in this neutral and staying neutral the entire time, as I'm letting that glute do the work by pushing myself forward. If I get to a point where externally I'm thinking get my body through space, I start to lean forward, and as I stand, I compress to stand. I'm doing more work to my lower back. So it's really about the relationship of your hip to rib during all repetitions of these exercises that we have to really hyper focus in. And that may mean regressing the range of motion or regressing the load to focus on, man, am I only finishing and feeling those glutes? We're doing if you think about this neutral position right here, I'm in a slight lower back arch, my normal back. If I can't bring my heel behind me, this hip extension, which is the glute exercise, right? In order for me to do that, if I have to compress, I don't have access to hip extension, I have lower back compression, right? And so I should think, can I move my heel behind my body without compressing my lower back? And just learning that control is how we get our glutes to work and not our lower back to work so much, right? So those are things you want to think about when you're doing those big hinge glute patterns. How much of a neutral position I am, and am I maintaining it during the whole exercise, right? And then post-exercise, this is super important. I do all those things. Do I find myself back into a super rounded, like seated position, and now I'm recovering in a not optimal position? That's why we love in a nice TV watch position, because I'm recovering in a nice easy extension, which my back wants to be in. That's something to focus on during those exercises. Hope that helps.